not in the family photo this year, Mom." He said it while adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror, not even looking at me, like he was mentioning a change in the weather, like I was a lamp that had been moved to a different room. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding a tray of gingerbread cookies I'd spent the morning decorating. Little trees, little stars, little reindeer with crooked legs. The same recipe my mother taught me. The same ones I'd made for Daniel every Christmas since he was 4 years old. "The photographer said too many people makes it cluttered," he continued, "and Vanessa wants a clean aesthetic this year, you understand." I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway. "Of course," I said. "I'll stay in the kitchen." He smiled then, relieved. The smile of a man who'd expected an argument and was pleased to find a doormat instead. He straightened his tie one final time and walked toward the living room, where his wife was arranging Iris and Mason on the white velvet couch she'd had delivered from some catalog I'd never heard of, her 18-year-old stepdaughter home from college, and her own son, 12, already learning to pose on command. I set the cookies on the counter. My hands weren't shaking, not yet. Through the archway, I could see the photographer positioning lights. I could hear Vanessa's voice, sharp and bright, telling the children to sit up straighter, to smile naturally, to stop touching their hair. I could see the massive Douglas fir they'd hired someone to decorate, covered in silver and gold, not a single handmade ornament in sight. And I could see the blank space on that couch where I was supposed to be, where I had always been. Decades of Christmases, decades of showing up, of cooking, of wrapping, of remembering. And now I was clutter. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. The flash went off. I heard the children laugh. I heard Daniel say something about posting it before dinner. I heard Vanessa suggest they take one more, just in case. I turned back to the kitchen and began washing dishes that were already clean. I should tell you about the house. Not Daniel's house. This gleaming new construction in the suburbs with its open floor plan and smart thermostat and 3-car garage. No, I mean the house I raised him in. The one on Maple Street with the yellow shutters and the wraparound porch. The one his father and I bought in 1981 with a down payment we'd saved for 7 years, eating rice and beans, skipping vacations, patching clothes instead of replacing them. That house is mine, still mine. Paid off in 1999, the year Daniel graduated high school. I remember the day we burned the mortgage papers in the fireplace. Richard held my hand. We watched the edges curl and blacken. "We did it, Elaine," he said. "It's ours forever." Richard died 4 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and total, in the garden he loved. I found him by the tomato plants, still holding his trowel. The doctor said he didn't suffer. I don't know if that's true or just something doctors say to widows so they can sleep. Daniel married young the first time. Sarah, her name was, a sweet girl from his college, Iris's mother. She died when Iris was 4. Car accident on a rainy night. The other driver ran a red light, gone before the ambulance arrived. I watched my son hollow out with grief. Iris was too young to understand why her mother wasn't coming home. A year later, Vanessa arrived, polished, ambitious, bringing order to the chaos of a widower's life. They married quickly. Mason came the following year, when Iris was 6. And somewhere in the reorganizing of my son's world, I watched Iris become a guest in her own home. After he passed, Daniel started visiting more. At first, I thought it was grief. I thought he was checking on me, making sure I was eating, making sure I wasn't alone. But the visits had a pattern I didn't recognize at first. He'd walk through the house slowly, opening closets, peering into the basement, asking about the plumbing, the roof, the electrical. "Just want to make sure you're safe here, Mom," he'd say. Then came the conversations. "You know, this house is a lot for one person. Have you thought about something smaller, more manageable? Vanessa knows a wonderful realtor." I said no, every time. Politely, firmly, no. The house wasn't just a house. It was Richard's hands in every door frame, his laughter in every room, his voice still echoing in the space between walls. I wasn't ready to leave. I would never be ready. But Daniel kept asking, and Vanessa kept finding brochures for senior communities with names like Sunset Pines and Golden Meadows, places where people go to be managed, places where Christmas means a plastic tree in a communal hall and a card from the staff. "Just think about it," she'd say, sliding the brochures across my own kitchen table like she was doing me a favor. I thought about it. I thought about it every night, and every night I decided the same thing. No. Christmas Eve at Daniel's house was always a production. Vanessa planned it like a military campaign. Catering ordered 6 weeks in advance, seating charts, dress codes, a photographer for the candid moments that were anything but candid. The children were coached on what to say when relatives arrived. Daniel was assigned conversation topics to rotate through, and I was given a role too, kitchen duty. "You're so good with the appetizers, Elaine," Vanessa would say. "We'd be lost without you back there." Back there, behind the swinging door, out of frame. I'd accepted it for years, told myself it was generational, that young people did things differently now, that at least I was included at all. I made excuses like an addict makes promises. Next year will be different. They're just stressed. They don't mean it the way it sounds. But this year something cracked. Maybe it was the photo. Maybe it was Daniel's tie, the way he adjusted it without looking at me. Maybe it was the word clutter, rattling around my skull like a marble in an empty jar. Maybe it was the decades of Christmases stacking up behind me like evidence I'd ignored for too long. I stood at the sink, hands in warm water, looking out the window at the snow beginning to fall. The backyard was perfect, landscaped and pristine, not a leaf out of place. Nothing like the backyard I grew up in, wild and tangled, full of hiding spots and adventure. Nothing like the backyard where I taught Daniel to catch fireflies. Did he remember that? Did he remember the jar we used? The holes I punched in the lid with a screwdriver? The way he cried when I told him we had to let them go? Probably not. Memory is selective. We keep what serves us and discard the rest. Heard footsteps behind me, light, quick, tentative. I turned. My granddaughter Iris stood in the doorway, 18 years old, home from her first semester of college, wearing a green velvet dress that clearly wasn't her choice. She looked miserable. "Grandma, are you okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just cleaning up." She glanced back toward the living room, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I heard what Dad said about the photo." My chest tightened. "It's nothing." Don't worry about it. It's not nothing." Her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. Not anger, determination. "You should be in the photo. You're the most important one." I set down the dish towel and looked at her. Really looked. This young woman standing in front of me, choosing me over the party in the next room. When had she grown up? When had she started seeing things so clearly? "Why do you say that?" She shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "Because you remember things. You remember Grandpa. You remember when Dad was little. You remember the real stuff, not just the stuff Vanessa puts on Instagram." I pulled her into a hug before she could see my eyes filling. She smelled like sugar cookies and lavender soap. She felt like hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "Iris." Vanessa's voice cut through the moment. "Come here. We're doing another round of photos." Iris pulled back, gave me a look that said more than words could, and disappeared through the swinging door. I stood alone in the kitchen, the tap still running, the snow still falling outside, and I made a decision. I didn't make a scene that night. That's not my way. I've never been the kind of woman who throws plates or raises her voice. My mother taught me that dignity was a form of armor. You keep it polished. You keep it on. And when the battle is over, you're still standing because you never let them see you break. So I smiled through dinner. I passed the cranberry sauce. I complimented the children on their manners and Vanessa on the table settings. I laughed at Daniel's jokes even when they weren't funny. I played the role they'd assigned me. But underneath, something was shifting. Tectonic, slow. After dessert, I excused myself early. "Tired," I said. "It's been a long day." Vanessa didn't argue. Daniel walked me to my car, not out of courtesy I realized later, but to make sure I actually left. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said at the curb. "The cookies were great." "You're welcome. Drive safe, okay? The roads might be icy." "I will." He hugged me. Quick, light, functional. The hug of a man checking a box. Then he turned and walked back inside without watching me leave. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. The snow had stopped. The street was quiet. All those beautiful houses lit up like postcards. All those perfect families inside performing their perfect lives. I thought about Iris. I thought about Richard. I thought about decades of Christmases and all the ones I'd never have again. Then I drove home. The house on Maple Street was dark when I arrived. I hadn't left any lights on, an old habit, saving electricity, though now it just meant I came home to shadows. I unlocked the door, hung up my coat, and walked through each room without turning anything on. The street lamp outside gave enough glow to see by. I ended up in Richard's study. It still smelled like him. Pipe tobacco and old books, even though I'd cleaned it dozens of times. His desk was the same as he'd left it. Leather blotter, brass lamp, the photograph of our wedding day in a silver frame. I sat in his chair. "They left me out of the photo," I said to the empty room. "Can you believe that?" No answer. Of course, no answer. But I could imagine what he'd say. Something sharp and funny. Something that would make me laugh despite myself. Richard always knew how to cut through the noise. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside, beneath old letters and tax returns, was a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside that folder was a document I'd almost forgotten existed, the deed to the house, both our names, and a will we'd written together, updated 3 years before he died, leaving everything to me with explicit instructions for what would happen after. I read it by the light of the street lamp, every word, every clause, every careful intention Richard and I had laid out, believing our son would honor them, believing family meant something, believing we'd raised him better than this. We were wrong, I whispered. Then I closed the folder, placed it back in the drawer, and went to bed. Christmas Day was quiet. I didn't expect a call from Daniel. He'd be busy with Vanessa's family, her parents flying in from Connecticut, her sister and brother-in-law arriving with their own photogenic children. I was not part of that production. I was intermission. I made myself tea. I read. I took a long bath. I called my sister in Florida, and we talked about nothing important, which was exactly what I needed. She didn't ask about Daniel. She knew better by now. In the afternoon, I took a walk. The snow had melted to slush, and the sidewalks were treacherous. But I needed air. I walked past houses I'd known for decades, waved to neighbors I'd watched grow old. Mrs. Patterson was out with her dog. The Hendersons had a new car in their driveway. Life went on, indifferent to whatever small dramas played out behind closed doors. When I got home, there was a voicemail, Iris. Hi, Grandma. Just wanted to say Merry Christmas. I hope you're not too sad. I made you something, but Vanessa said we can't come visit until New Year's. I'll bring it then, okay? I love you. I saved a message, played it twice more. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. In England, it's a holiday. Here, it's just December 26th, a nothing day, a liminal space between celebration and the long gray stretch toward New Year's. Most people spend it returning gifts, eating leftovers, recovering from family. I spent it making phone calls. The first was to Harold Bennett, our family attorney. Richard and I had used him for 30 years. He'd drawn up our wills, handled our taxes, advised us through every major decision. He was 74 now, semi-retired, but he still took my calls. Elaine, he said warmly, Merry Christmas. How are you? I need to update my will. A pause. I see. Is everything all right? Everything is becoming all right. Can you come by tomorrow? Of course. Afternoon work? Afternoon works. The second call was the hardest. I dialed Daniel's number. It rang 4 times. Then Vanessa picked up. Oh, hi, Elaine. Her voice was distracted. I could hear children in the background, the clatter of dishes. Daniel's in the shower. Can he call you back? That's fine. I just wanted to let you know I'll be stopping by tomorrow, late afternoon. Tomorrow? We're not really... we have plans to... It won't take long, I said. I just need to discuss something with Daniel, something important. A beat of silence. I could hear her calculating whether to push back, whether to ask questions, whether to simply handle me the way she handled everything, with that smooth managerial efficiency that made me feel like a problem to be solved. All right, she said finally. I'll let him know. Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for hosting yesterday. The house looked beautiful. Of course, we'll see you tomorrow. I hung up and sat with the phone in my lap for a long while. Outside, the sky was starting to dim. Another winter night settling over Maple Street, the old houses creaking with cold, the memories inside them shifting like sediment. I thought about what I was about to do, the conversations I'd need to have, the faces Daniel and Vanessa would make when they understood. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was clear. And clarity, I've learned, is its own kind of power. I should tell you about the money, not because it's the most important part, but because it's the part Daniel cared about most. And understanding that helps you understand everything else. When Richard died, he left me comfortable. Not wealthy. We were never wealthy. But secure. The house. Paid off. A pension from his years at the engineering firm. Social Security. A modest investment account we'd built up slowly, year by year, since before Daniel was born. The total, when I sat down with Harold and added it all up, was just under $2 million. I know that sounds like a lot. It is a lot. But it's a different kind of a lot when you're 71 years old and alone. It's security. It's not having to worry about medical bills or care facilities or becoming a burden. It's the ability to say no. Richard and I had talked about what would happen when we were gone. The house would go to Daniel. That was always the plan. The investments would be split, some to Daniel, some to charity, some held in trust for grandchildren. We wanted to be fair. We wanted to be generous. We wanted to believe that our son would be grateful. But gratitude, I've learned, has an expiration date. Once people start counting money that isn't theirs yet, something changes. They stop seeing you as a person. They start seeing you as a delay. I first noticed it 2 years ago. A comment Daniel made at dinner, offhand, almost joking. You should really think about what happens to the house, Mom. Real estate in this area is only going up. Be ashamed to let it sit empty too long. Empty. As if I were already gone. Then came the questions about my health. Not concerned questions. Strategic ones. Was I seeing a doctor regularly? Had I considered long-term care insurance? Did I have a plan for the future? The future, a polite word for death. Vanessa was worse because Vanessa was less careful. She'd mention estate planning at family dinners, suggest I simplify my finances, recommend lawyers who specialized in elder transitions. She never said what she really meant, but I heard it anyway. Hurry up. I stopped sharing financial information after that. When Daniel asked about accounts, I deflected. When Vanessa brought up the house, I changed the subject. They didn't like it, but what could they say? I was still competent, still sharp, still paying my own bills and driving my own car and making my own decisions. That was the thing they hadn't counted on. I was still here, still capable, still holding the pen that would sign everything over, or not. And now, after Christmas Eve, after the photo, after clutter, I knew exactly what I was going to do with that pen. Harold arrived at 2 o'clock on December 27th, briefcase in hand, wearing the same brown wool coat he'd worn for as long as I could remember. He smelled like coffee and winter air. The visit to Daniel would come later. First, I needed the legal pieces in motion. I made him tea, and we sat in the living room, the fire crackling, the house warm and quiet around us. Tell me what you're thinking, Elaine. I told him. All of it. The Christmas Eve photo, the years of being managed, the brochures for senior homes, the feeling of disappearing inside my own family. He listened without interrupting, his face neutral, professional. But I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or anger on my behalf. When I finished, he set down his teacup. You want to change the will? Yes. Significantly? Completely. He opened his briefcase and took out a legal pad. Walked me through it. I did. Every detail, the house, the accounts, the investments. Who would receive what, and who would receive nothing. He wrote it all down in his careful script, asking questions when he needed clarification, offering suggestions when he saw complications. "This will come as a shock to Daniel," he said finally. "I know. He may contest it. Let him try. I'm of sound mind. I have medical records to prove it, and I have decades of documentation showing exactly how I've been treated." Harold nodded slowly. "You've thought this through." "I've had 4 years to think about it. I just wasn't ready to act until now." He closed his notepad. "I'll have the documents drafted by Friday. You can review them over the weekend and we'll finalize next week. Is there anything else?" I hesitated. There was one more thing, the hardest thing, but it needed to be done. "I'd like to write a letter, to be included with the will, something Daniel will read after I'm gone." "That can be arranged. It needs to be honest, not cruel, but honest. He needs to understand why." Harold looked at me for a long moment. "Elaine, in my experience, people rarely understand. Not really. They see what they want to see, and they rewrite history to protect themselves. Your son may never accept what you're telling him." "I know," I said, "but I'll have said it. That's what matters." He stood, gathered his briefcase. At the door, he paused. "Richard would be proud of you." My throat tightened. "You think so?" "I know so. He always said you were the strong one." He was right. The next afternoon, after Harold left with his notes and his promises, I put on my coat and drove to Daniel's house. It was 4:30. The sky was already dimming. Vanessa answered the door. She was wearing a silk blouse, her hair pulled back, her face arranged in that expression of polite inconvenience I knew so well. "Elaine." Not a greeting, an observation. "I said I'd come. Here I am." She stepped aside, not quite welcoming, and I walked into the foyer. The house still smelled like Christmas. Pine needles and cinnamon, the ghost of yesterday's feast. The photographer's equipment was gone, but I could see the evidence of the session, a tripod mark on the carpet, a reflector leaning against the wall. "Daniel's in his office," she said. "I'll get him. Actually, I'd like to speak with both of you, if you have a moment." Something shifted in her face, wariness. "Of course, let me get him." She disappeared down the hallway, and I stood alone in the foyer, looking at the photos on the wall. The family portrait from last year. I was in that one, barely, standing at the edge like an afterthought. The one from the year before. I was in that too, standing between the children, one hand on each shoulder. The only time I'd been allowed in the center, and now, somewhere on Vanessa's phone, the new one, the one without me. "Mom!" Daniel appeared in the doorway, Vanessa behind him. He looked uncomfortable, which told me he already suspected something. "Everything okay?" "Let's sit down," I said. We moved to the living room. I took the armchair by the window, Richard's favorite spot whenever we visited. Daniel and Vanessa sat on the white velvet couch, side by side, a united front. "What's going on?" Daniel asked. I took a breath. "I wanted to talk about Christmas Eve." "The photo thing?" He waved a hand. "Mom, I told you it wasn't personal. Vanessa's designer said..." Designer now. Earlier it had been the photographer. Different excuse, same result. "I'm not here to argue about the photo." He stopped, waited. "I'm here to tell you that I've made some decisions about my estate." Vanessa's posture changed. just slightly, a straightening of the spine, a narrowing of the eyes. Daniel's face went very still. "What kind of decisions?" he asked. "I'm updating my will. Harold is drafting the new documents now." "Updating how?" I looked at my son, 46 years old, graying at the temples, just like his father. The same jawline, the same hands, but the eyes were different, colder, more calculating. When had that happened? When had my little boy who chased fireflies become a man who looked at his mother and saw an obstacle? "The house on Maple Street will no longer be left to you." The silence was absolute. Even the clock on the mantel seemed to stop. "What?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm putting it in a trust for Iris. She'll receive it when she turns 25, along with a portion of the investments. The rest of the investments will go to charity, the hospice where your father spent his last day, the food bank we used to volunteer at, the scholarship fund at your old high school." "You can't," Vanessa started. "I can. It's my property, my money, my decision." Daniel leaned forward. "Mom, let's talk about this. You're upset about Christmas Eve, I get it. We should have handled it better. But this is extreme. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. This is insane. You're cutting me out because of a photograph?" "I'm cutting you out because of what the photograph represents. 20 years of being pushed aside. 20 years of being tolerated instead of loved. 20 years of watching you calculate my expiration date." His face flushed. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a stack of papers. "I keep records, Daniel. I always have. Do you want to know how many times you visited me since your father died? 47. And 31 of those visits included questions about the house, the finances, or when I planned to downsize. I counted. Vanessa made a sound, something between a gasp and a scoff. "This is ridiculous. You're being paranoid." "I'm being accurate. There's a difference." Daniel stood up, paced to the window. His hands were shaking. "Mom, I don't know what you think has been happening, but you're wrong. We care about you. We include you in everything." "Everything except the family photo." He turned. "That was one mistake." It was the last mistake. We stared at each other. Mother and son. Decades of history between us, and somehow it had come to this, a living room standoff, both of us holding cards the other couldn't see. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "Maybe, but I doubt it." I stood up. My knees ached, but I didn't let it show. I gathered my purse, my coat, the papers I'd brought as evidence. At the doorway, I paused. "I want you to know something, Daniel. I don't hate you. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because somewhere along the way you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a bank account with a heartbeat. That's not love. That's inventory management. And I refuse to be inventory." He didn't respond. Neither did Vanessa. They just watched me walk out, the same way Daniel had watched me leave on Christmas Eve, making sure I was gone. This time I didn't look back either. The drive home was quiet. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the engine and the gray winter light. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, lightness. Not happiness exactly. There's no happiness in cutting off your own child, but relief, the relief of a decision finally made. When I got home, there was a car in my driveway, small, blue, unfamiliar. I parked behind it and walked to the porch. where a figure was waiting. Iris. She was shivering, her green coat too thin for the weather, a backpack clutched to her chest. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Grandma, I didn't know where else to go." I unlocked the door and ushered her inside, made hot chocolate, wrapped her in the Afghan from the living room couch, sat beside her and waited. "They were yelling," she finally said, "after you left. Vanessa was screaming about money. Dad was saying things about you. Bad things. I didn't want to hear any more." "So you drove here?" She nodded. "I just got in the car and left. I didn't even tell him." Her voice cracked. "Is that okay?" "I'm not mad, sweetheart. I'm glad you're here. Is it true, what they said, that you're giving everything to charity?" "Not everything. I'm giving some of it to you." Her eyes widened. "Me?" "The house, when you're older, and some money for college, for starting your life. But that's not why I did it, Iris. I didn't do it to punish your father. I did it because—" I paused, searching for the right words. "Because I needed to make a choice about who I want to be in whatever time I have left. And I don't want to be someone who gets erased from photographs. I don't want to be someone who stays quiet just to keep the peace. I want to be someone who stands up, even if it's late, even if it costs." She was crying now, silently, the tears running down her cheeks, her glasses fogging. "I don't want you to die," she whispered. "I'm not planning on it any time soon. But when it happens, I want you to know something." I took her hand. "You saw me. When everyone else looked through me, you saw me. That matters more than you know." She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. We sat like that for a long time, the house settling around us, the winter dark, pressing against the windows. Eventually, I called her parents. Daniel was curt, angry, but he agreed to pick her up. When he arrived, he didn't come to the door, just waited in the driveway with the engine running. At the door, Iris hugged me. "I'll come visit," she said, "as much as I can. They can't stop me. They can try. Let them." I watched her walk to the car. I went inside, locked the door, turned on every light in the house. Then I sat down at Richard's desk and began to write. "To my son Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I imagine you're angry. You're probably confused. You might even be looking for ways to contest what I've done, to undo the choices I made. But before you do that, I want you to understand something. I loved you from the moment I felt you move inside me. 46 years ago, you entered this world screaming, red-faced, furious at being born. I held you and thought, this is the meaning of everything, every sacrifice, every struggle, every boring Tuesday and sleepless night. I don't know when that changed. I don't know when you started looking at me and seeing an obstacle instead of the woman who would have stepped in front of a train for you. Maybe it was gradual, so slow neither of us noticed. Maybe it was Vanessa's influence, though I suspect she only amplified what was already there. Maybe it was just the nature of time, the way children grow away from their parents, forgetting that they were ever small enough to be held. But I noticed, Daniel. I noticed every time you asked about the house without asking about me. Every time you visited with an agenda. Every time you looked at your watch while I was talking, counting the minutes until you could leave. I noticed, and I said nothing, because that's what mothers do. We absorb. We forgive. We pretend it doesn't hurt. Christmas Eve broke something in me. Not the photo, though that was cruel, but what the photo represented, the final proof that I had become invisible, furniture to be moved, clutter to be cropped out. I decided that night that I would not die invisible. The will is what it is. The house goes to Iris because Iris sees me. The money goes to causes your father and I believed in, because at least that way it will do some good. You'll have enough to live on. I made sure of that. But you won't have what you were waiting for. The windfall, the inheritance, the reward for surviving your mother. I'm not sorry. I considered being sorry, but I couldn't manage it. I think you'll be fine, Daniel. You've always been good at making money. You're charming. You're smart. You don't need mine. What I hope, and I know this is probably foolish, is that one day you'll understand, not agree, just understand, that your mother was a person, that she had feelings, pride, dignity, that she wasn't a number on a spreadsheet or a burden to be managed, that she loved you, even at the end, especially at the end. Take care of Iris. She's the best of all of us. Your mother, Elaine. I finished the letter at midnight, sealed it in an envelope, wrote Daniel's name on the front in my steadiest handwriting. Then I went to the kitchen and made myself tea. Chamomile with honey, the way Richard used to make it. I sat at the table where we'd eaten 10,000 meals together, raised a child, fought and made up, lived an entire life. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels full, not empty. All those years pressed into the walls, the floors, the creaking stairs. I could feel Richard there, not as a ghost, but as a presence, a warmth. I did it, I said out loud. I finally did it. No response, but I hadn't expected one. Sometimes you say things just to hear them exist. The weeks that followed were strange, quiet, but not peaceful. A holding pattern, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Daniel didn't call. I didn't expect him to. Vanessa sent a single text, 3 days after my visit. We'll be consulting with our own attorney. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Harold finalized the will on January 3rd. I signed it in his office, 2 witnesses present, everything documented and notarized. He shook my hand when it was done. It's ironclad, he said. Whatever they try, it won't work. I believed him. I had to. Iris texted me every day. Little things. A photo of her cat, a complaint about homework, a joke she'd heard at school. She was careful not to mention her parents, and I was careful not to ask. We existed in our own small world, tethered by pixels and persistence. On January 15th, she asked if she could visit. I said yes. She drove over, arrived with her backpack and a Tupperware container of cookies she'd baked herself. They were misshapen, slightly burnt, the best cookies I'd ever tasted. I told them I was going to a study group, she said, sitting on the living room floor with her legs crossed. They didn't ask which one. They don't know you're here? She shook her head. Is that okay? I thought about it. The lie, the deception. The 18-year-old sitting in front of me, choosing me over her parents' expectations. It wasn't okay. It was complicated and messy and potentially explosive. It's okay, I said, but we should be careful. She nodded, relieved. Then she pulled a folder from her backpack. I found something in Dad's office. My stomach tightened. What is it? She handed me the folder. Inside were printouts, emails mostly. Conversations between Daniel and Vanessa from over a year ago. I skimmed them. my heart sinking with each line. She can't live forever. Have you talked to someone about getting power of attorney? The house alone is worth 800 Ks. We should start pushing harder. Maybe if she falls, we can make a case for assisted living. I stopped reading, set the folder down. My hands were shaking now. Where did you find these? His computer. He doesn't know I know his password. She looked at me, her eyes fierce. I wanted you to have proof, in case they try something. I pulled her into a hug, held her tight. This young woman, this brave, brilliant, determined young woman, had just handed me ammunition I never knew I needed. Thank you, I whispered. You have no idea what this means. I think I do, she said. You're the only one who's ever been honest with me. The only one who treats me like a person instead of a prop. I wanted to return the favor. After she left, I sat with the folder for a long time, read every email, every calculation, every cold clinical discussion of my life and death, reduced to spreadsheets and timelines. Then I called Harold. We need to talk, I said. I have new information. The meeting with Harold lasted 3 hours. We went through every document, every email, every piece of evidence Iris had gathered. By the end, his face was grim. This changes things, he said. How? If they try to contest the will on grounds of mental incapacity, we can introduce these as evidence of predatory intent. It shows they were planning to manipulate you. Any judge would see through it. And if they try to claim undue influence, same thing. The pattern is clear. They were positioning themselves to take control of your assets. The will isn't a response to one bad Christmas. It's protection against years of documented exploitation. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like validation. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't overreacted. The threat was real, and now I had proof. What do we do next? Nothing, for now. We wait. If they file, we respond. If they don't, the will stands as written. He paused. But Elaine, I have to ask, are you prepared for what this might mean? For your relationship with Daniel? I thought about my son, the baby I'd held, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become. There is no relationship, I said. There hasn't been for years. I just couldn't admit it until now. Harold nodded. He didn't argue. He'd been doing this too long to believe in fairy tales. February came cold and gray. I spent most of my time at home, reading, cooking, tending to the house that would someday belong to Iris. I cleaned out closets, organized photo albums, labeled boxes with notes about what was inside and who might want it. Not morbid, practical. I was making order out of a life, piece by piece. Iris visited when she could. We developed a routine: hot chocolate, cookies, conversation. She told me about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. I told her about her grandfather, about the early years with Daniel, about the life we'd built before things went wrong. Why did Dad change? She asked once. I didn't have a good answer. People get lost, I said. They start wanting things more than they want people. They forget what matters. Will he ever find his way back? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so, but hope isn't a plan. She thought about that for a while. I won't get lost, she said finally, I promise. I believe you. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, I got a letter. Not from Daniel, from a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it with steady hands, though my heart was racing. Dear Mrs. Holbrook, we represent Daniel and Vanessa Holbrook in the matter of estate planning and fiduciary concerns. Our clients have requested a meeting to discuss the recent changes to your testamentary documents. They're concerned about potential undue influence and wish to ensure your well-being and mental clarity. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange a consultation. I read it twice. Then I called Harold. It started, I said. The meeting took place on March 1st in a conference room at Harold's office. Daniel sat on one side of the table with his lawyers, two of them, young and sharp in matching gray suits. I sat on the other side with Harold. Vanessa wasn't there, which told me she was the one pulling the strings but didn't want fingerprints on the weapon. Mrs. Holbrook, one of the lawyers began, thank you for agreeing to meet. Our clients simply want to ensure. I know what your clients want, I said. They want to contest the will. They think I'm senile or manipulated or both. They're wrong. The lawyer blinked, glanced at Daniel. Daniel's jaw was tight. Mom, he said, this isn't an attack. We're worried about you. No, you're worried about the money. You've been worried about it for years. I have documentation. Harold opened his briefcase, placed the folder of emails on the table, slid it toward Daniel's lawyers. These are communications between your clients discussing strategies to obtain power of attorney over Mrs. Holbrook, timelines for her death, and plans to pressure her into assisted living for the purpose of accessing her assets. We have a cognitive assessment from Mrs. Holbrook's physician confirming she is of sound mind. We have testimony from her attorney that no undue influence was involved in the drafting of her will, and we have these emails proving that any claim of concern for her well-being is, to put it plainly, a lie. The room went silent. One of Daniel's lawyers picked up the folder, flipped through it. His face went pale. Daniel leaned forward. Where did you get those? I looked at my son, this man I'd created, this stranger. It doesn't matter where I got them. What matters is what they say. You've been waiting for me to die, Daniel, planning for it, calculating it. And now you're upset because I made plans of my own. That's not... It is. It's exactly what it is. And I want you to know something. I leaned forward, too, matching his posture. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. Done pretending you care. Done hoping things will change. Done being clutter in your life. He flinched at the word. Good. He should flinch. You'll get enough to be comfortable, I continued. I made sure of that. But the house your father and I built with our bare hands, the house where I raised you, the house you never bothered to visit unless you wanted something, that goes to Iris. Because Iris sees me, because Iris shows up, because Iris is the only one in this family who understands what family actually means. Daniel stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Contest the will if you want. I'll see you in court. And I'll bring every email, every unanswered phone call, every brochure for Sunset Pines that Vanessa left on my kitchen table. The whole story. Every ugly piece of it. His lawyers were already packing up. They knew a losing battle when they saw one. At the door, Daniel paused, looked back at me. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, shame, recognition of what he'd lost. Then it was gone. Goodbye, Mom, he said. Goodbye, Daniel. The door closed. Harold and I sat in the silence for a long time. That was hard, he said finally. Yes, you did well. I know. He gathered his papers. They won't contest. Not with what we have. They'd lose, and they know it. This is over, Elaine. I nodded. But I wasn't thinking about the legal battle. I was thinking about Daniel as a baby, red-faced and screaming. Daniel as a boy, chasing fireflies in the backyard. Daniel as a young man, so full of promise and potential. And Daniel now, walking out of my life for the last time. Some victories don't feel like victories. They feel like surgery, necessary, life-saving, but still a wound. I went home, made tea, sat in Richard's chair, and finally, after all these weeks, I cried. Spring came slowly to Maple Street. The snow melted. The crocuses pushed through. The air softened from bitter to cool to almost warm. I spent my days in the garden, coaxing life from the soil the way Richard used to do. My knees protested. My back ached. But there was something holy about dirt under your fingernails, about watching things grow. Iris finished her freshman year of college in May. I attended her end-of-year showcase. She was studying graphic design 3 rows back on the aisle, a good seat I'd arrived early to claim. Daniel and Vanessa were there too, across the auditorium, pretending not to see me. That was fine. I wasn't there for them. When Iris presented her portfolio to the panel, she looked directly at me and smiled. A real smile, the kind you can't fake. Later, at the reception, she found me by the refreshment table. I can't believe you came, she said. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away. She hugged me, right there in front of everyone. I saw Vanessa watching from across the room, her face a mask of controlled fury. Daniel whispered something to her. She turned away. Thank you, Iris said, for everything. Thank you for seeing me. Always, Grandma, always. Summer unfolded like a gift I hadn't known I was waiting for. Iris spent 2 weeks with me in July. Her choice, carved out between her summer job and preparing for her sophomore year. Daniel had objected weakly. Vanessa hadn't said a word. Those 2 weeks were the happiest I'd been in years. We cooked together, gardened together, took long walks through the neighborhood, past houses I'd known for decades, trading stories about the people who'd lived there. I showed her the creek where Daniel used to catch tadpoles, the tree where Richard had carved our initials, the corner store where I'd bought penny candy as a girl. This is your history, I told her. This is where you come from. I won't forget, she said. I promise. On her last night, we sat on the porch swing, Richard's swing, the one he'd built when Daniel was born, and watched the fireflies blink in the darkness. Grandma, Iris said, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret it? The will, the fight, all of it? I thought about it. Really thought. No, I said finally. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that things couldn't have been different. But I don't regret standing up. I don't regret choosing myself. Even though you lost Dad, I didn't lose him, sweetheart. He left a long time ago. I just finally stopped pretending he hadn't. She leaned her head against my shoulder. The swing creaked softly. The fireflies pulsed their tiny lights. Here and gone, here and gone. Sometimes I'm scared, she said quietly, of growing up and not noticing myself becoming like them. You won't. How do you know? Because you're asking the question. Because you're aware. The people who become like them never ask. They just drift, inch by inch, until one day they look in the mirror and don't recognize what's looking back. I put my arm around her. You see people, Iris? You see me. You always have. Even when your own home made you invisible, That's not something you learn. It's something you are. She didn't respond, just sat there, breathing, existing, being seen right back. I'm writing this in October. The leaves are changing. The house smells like apples and cinnamon. I've been baking. Too much probably, but who's going to stop me? I'm 72 years old. I'll eat what I want. Daniel sent a card for my birthday last month. Just a card. No visit, no call. The message inside was generic, clearly written by someone who'd bought it at the last minute. Wishing you health and happiness. Not love. Not I'm sorry. Just wishes, distant and polite. The kind you send to a colleague you barely know. I put it in the drawer with the others. Not to keep, just to document. The pattern continues, even now. Maybe especially now, but I'm not waiting for it to change anymore. That's the difference. That's what the fight taught me. You can love someone and let them go. You can grieve a relationship that's still technically alive. You can be the villain in someone else's story and the hero in your own. I'm not clutter. I'm not a prop. I'm not a bank account with a heartbeat. I'm Elaine Marie Holbrook. I built a house with my bare hands, raised a family, buried my husband, and survived my son's indifference. I'm still here, still standing, still taking up exactly as much space as I deserve. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, I want you to know something. You matter. Your presence matters. Your voice matters. Even if the people who should see you have stopped looking. Even if you've spent years making yourself small to keep the peace. Even if someone told you, in so many words, that you're not in the picture, you can change the story. You can redraw the frame. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you've ever done. But there's a version of your life where you stop being furniture and start being fire, where you stop asking permission and start making decisions, where you look in the mirror and see someone who refused to disappear. I found that version at 71 years old, standing in my son's kitchen, holding a tray of cookies nobody wanted. You can find it too. And if this story meant something to you, if you saw yourself in this story, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, or just sit with it a while, the way I sat with Richard's chair after he died, letting the weight of it settle into something bearable. That's enough. That's always enough. The fire's low now. The house is quiet. The leaves are still falling outside, gold and red and brown, covering the lawn like confetti after a party no one wanted to end. I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine. I'm going to sit in Richard's chair, and I'm going to watch the last light fade from the sky, grateful for everything I have, everything I made, everything I refuse to let them take. This is my house. This is my story, and I'm finally in the picture.